We are recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this AIM Center webinar / information session, The Path to Being an AIM Cohort State. We're so glad that you're joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to our conversation this afternoon. Cynthia, could you go to the next slide? I just want to remind you that closed captions are being provided for this webinar, and we want to thank Lenore from ACS Captions for providing that service. You can select the closed caption button in the Zoom interface, and the captions will appear along the bottom of the screen. Next slide. And we welcome you to contribute to the conversation and ask any questions that come up throughout the webinar. You can use the text chat to do that. And one of the things you need to make sure is you want to select all panelists and attendees from the drop-down menu that's above the text entry field. Otherwise, you may send a comment or a question, but only one person may get it. But if you select that option, all panelists and attendees, it will make sure that everyone who's in the chat can see your comments and your questions. Next slide. And just a reminder that we are recording this session, and within a week, we will have a recording available for you with closed captions. And Leslie is going to post the link to the events page where you registered for this webinar. And that's the same place where you'll find a link to the recording. And the next slide. So I am now going to turn it over to Cynthia Curry, who is director of the AIM Center. My name is Luis Perez. I'm a technical assistant specialist, and I have the pleasure of working with Cynthia and my colleague Leslie, who is also going to be assisting us today. She is going to be posting some of the links in the chat. So Cynthia, take it away.
Great, thanks Luis, and welcome everybody to today's informational webinar. We're really excited about this opportunity to open to states and school districts, and as you will see as we're describing the benefits, responsibilities, and the criteria that we've established for the AIM state and the cohort itself, that there are lots of opportunities for everybody within a system that has a role in making sure that individuals with disabilities have educational materials and technologies that are accessible. So we're really excited about what we have planned for this next AIM cohort, and we are delighted that you're here. The objective is simply that you all have what you need, that you have the information that you need to successfully complete the AIM state application. So as we get underway, we just have a few questions, a few polls that Leslie is going to administer for us to get a little bit of background information. We really appreciate you taking the time to enter any questions as we go along through the webinar. We want to make sure that you have all the information that you need. But in the as we get underway, we have a few questions for you to probe a little bit of background. So Leslie, if you would administer poll 1. So the first question is, have you reviewed the AIM state application information on our website? So obviously that's the first place to go to understand what the responsibilities of an AIM state are, what the benefits are, and what are the criteria that we'll be using to select the next AIM cohort. So it'd just be helpful to know who's looked at that, and that was not a prerequisite to this webinar. It's great if you just hopped on because you are curious, but it's helpful to know. So if Leslie, if you would go ahead and show the results of that poll. Okay, great. So this is helpful. Looks like most people have not checked it out. So this is helpful to know as we go through the information. Poll 2. The next poll kind of takes it to the question to the next level. Have you talked with others in your state about applying for the AIM cohort? And of course, you don't necessarily have had to look at the information on our website to have talked with others in your state. It'd be really important that you develop a team, work with some others on that application. So just be thinking about this if you haven't already. Who has already talked with others in their state about this opportunity? Go ahead and display the results, Leslie. Okay, great. So almost everybody. Terrific. So keep talking. We want to make sure that you have all the support that you need to complete the application, and Luis is going to walk you through the application itself, and so you'll see that it'll be of your benefit, to have made some connections in the process of preparing. And I believe there's one last question. This is part 2. So it was really helpful to see who has been through the information on the website. That's kind of a giveaway to the answer to this question, which is, did you attend the first informational session on February 14th? So this is a part 2. The idea was that if people came to part 1 and they had questions, they could come back to part 2. But of course, we also knew that we would have some people who hadn't been to the first session. So would you go ahead and display the results, Leslie? Okay, okay, great. So nobody came to the first session. So we will just do a repeat, really helpful to know. And we may have some other people come in later. We did give people a heads up that if they did come to the first session, we did a little bit of probing to find out who had registered. We knew we'd have a lot of new people who hadn't been to that first session. So we may get some people who came on February 14th come in a little bit later. Okay, thanks, Leslie. You can go ahead and close the poll. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to go over to the AIM Center website, to the section that provides an overview of the application. So everybody should see my screen. Just a quick confirmation in the chat would be great, or Leslie or Luis, just let me know that my screen is appearing okay. Great. So the way you get to the information, you go ahead to our website, which is aim.cas.org. It's aem.cas.org. Go to the About AIM tab, and then the very last option is the AIM State Cohort application. This has all of the information, the background information, as well as a link to the application itself. The top part really is just an introduction, lets you know that the deadline is Friday, May 1st, and also some information about today's webinar. This is the second of 2 informational webinars that we're providing about the application process, but we are available anytime. If you have follow-up questions, if you know of other people who you talk to and they missed this informational webinar, of course it's recorded, but we're also here to answer questions as they arise. We want to make sure that you have all the information that you need to be successful. So the idea of this opportunity is that we'll be partnering with 5 states. We're calling them our AIM states, our accessible educational materials states. Each individual state will receive customized support in the form of technical assistance from the AIM Center. So the goal is for you as a state to improve the system that you have in place around procurement, selection, creation, distribution of accessible materials and technologies for individuals with disabilities. So the primary focus is K-12, your K-12 system. But we also, in the process of providing this technical assistance, will also be supporting other agencies within your state, because we want to make sure that as individuals transition all the way from early childhood through workforce entry, that there's communication across your state at each of those agencies to make sure that there's a continuous access for individuals with disabilities to accessible materials and technologies. So that's sort of the bigger picture. Your state level team is your K-12. There needs to be your K-12 leadership in your state. So that team can be made up of your ed tech people at the state level, special education, curriculum and instruction, folks from your Assistive Technology Act project, your Instructional Resources Center. But it needs to be state level individuals, personnel who have some influence over decision making on your K-12 system, as well as representation from 3 school districts. And those would be leaders in school districts that are also willing to collaborate at the state level. So collaborate with your state leadership team on improving their local level provision. Because obviously at the state level, you want to make sure that there's cross communication between what you're developing at the state level for policies, for procedures, for guidelines, to be testing those and be developing them in partnership with school districts. So as part of your partnership with the AIM Center and being an AIM state also is a requirement that you're partnering with at least 3 school districts going through this process. So that's the big state leadership partnership. And that group will receive what we call intensive technical assistance. So the AIM Center staff, Luis, myself, and others who work within the AIM Center at CAST will be providing you with monthly, ongoing, continuous technical assistance between the summer of 2020. So we're hoping to, well, first of all, make sure that all the applications are in by May 1st is one goal. And then our second goal is to notify states of our selection by June 5th. And then over the summer, be working with you to help you get up and running and to be prepared for implementing some of these best practices around improving accessible material and technology provision for individuals who need them in the fall. So let's take a look a little bit deeper at that. So scrolling down this page, you'll come to how it works. Putting together your state leadership team, again, we'd like to see about 5 people at the state level on your state team, and then the 3 districts. So leadership from the 3 districts, that's your K-12, what we call intensive technical assistance group. And then your state level team will select representation from representatives from other agencies that include learners. So your early childhood programs, higher ed, and workforce. So at the workforce level, that would be voc rehab, career and technical education. Your K-12 system, of course, works closely with CTE and VR. So representation from a lot of the people, individuals that are already supporting transition into workforce would be part of your team. Higher ed would be community college, university system representation. And then your early childhood, that would be your Part C programs, Head Start, other early childhood education representation in your state. So again, the idea is that those groups would be part of an interagency collaborative, really to help build communication across the system. So as your K-12 provision of accessible materials and technologies gets stronger, that those other groups that support learners in your state, whether it be early childhood, higher ed, or workforce entry, are also benefiting and are in the loop on what these processes, what these procedures are. So having representation from those groups, that's your interagency collaborative. And we have specialists at CAS who have background in early childhood, in higher ed, and in workforce that will work with those groups separately from your state K-12 leadership team. So working in parallel, but also bringing the groups together on occasion, and we have mapped out what that might look like to make sure that the communication is ongoing, but to make sure that the K-12 system is really at the heart of the improvement system, and then informing those other groups. Each group obviously operates under separate laws, under separate provision systems. So that's where the targeted technical assistance from AIM Center staff who have background in those areas will be especially helpful. So some of the benefits of being an AIM state. So that's a lot of work, right? We're asking you to pull together a really comprehensive, robust team of professionals that have responsibilities and roles in making sure that individuals with disabilities have accessible materials and technologies at the same time as everybody else, whether they're in early childhood, K-12, higher ed, or workforce setting, and also parent representation as well. So having every state obviously has parent centers, parent training centers. We would also like to have somebody from that group to be part of your team. So obviously we're asking you a lot to pull these people together. We also will support that process. So we have partnerships at the national level, as well as a lot of different states. where we can help guide you, help to direct you to the right people in your state to help facilitate the development of these leadership teams and this interagency collaborative. So we are here to help you with that. As part of the application process that Luis will show you, we're not asking for you to list those people right now. We are asking you a series of questions around readiness to make that happen, and also to support us in being prepared to help you do that. So why go through this? Why go through this process? Well, you're going to receive high quality technical assistance at no cost. If your state has been really working toward the provision of AIM, the AIM Center we have a set of quality indicators for providing AIM to all students who need them across the state. We will help you with the implementation of those. So identifying what are evidence-based practices that are already part of your system, what might be lacking, and supporting you in making changes to the system. And for your individual state, we customize that. So we're working directly with your team. And then we're also bringing you together with the 4 other states that make up the 5 states of the AIM cohort, so that you can exchange resources, problem solve with other states that are working on similar goals. Also, we'll receive a $2,000 annual stipend. It's not much, but it is worthy of providing some additional professional learning if your team needs supplies or attending a conference, a subscription. That $2,000 can go toward that. We're also in partnership with the Assistive Technology Industry Association, offering a learning center subscription for up to 40 seats for the individuals who are on your team. So these are also come with CEUs. They're online learning opportunities related to lots of different areas across multiple stakeholder groups in relation to assistive technology. So on this page are also the responsibilities. A lot of these I've already walked through. So developing your AIM Interagency Collaborative with representation from early childhood, higher ed workforce, and parent centers. Coordinating with the AIM Center to convene the members of your leadership team for a kickoff. So this would be between October and January is what we're hoping. So we'll be supporting you in getting your team together and your interagency collaborative, between when your state is selected in June through September, working with you, iteratively in getting your team together. And then we'd like you to have a kickoff where you have your state leadership team and your interagency collaborative together. An AIM Center staff person will be there with you, and that will be an opportunity to kick off your plan, share, develop a common understanding, shared goals, vision with everybody on your team, and really map out that plan for 2020 to 2024. Of course, with flexibility, because we know that these plans can change in a year, let alone 4 years. Then, of course, you'll receive ongoing technical assistance from the AIM Center. You'll get intensive technical assistance for your leadership team, and then targeted technical assistance for those groups in your interagency collaborative. Maintaining communication with us ongoing, participating in the AIM cohort. So this number 4, maintaining communication and coordination, really is individually. So this is sort of the one-on-one support that you would get from the AIM Center. And then participating in the AIM cohort, that's the collaboration with the other 4 states. Supporting us in the development and dissemination of AIM Center products and services. So we need to be developing resources that can be scaled up nationally. So what we're learning from all of you will apply to the development of online modules, obviously revisions to the quality indicators, presentations, webinars, guidance, policy briefs. So all of those things, we would be looking for you to provide us with feedback, and also in many cases ask you to help us co-develop some of those. And then of course contribute to our ongoing evaluation. The AIM Center is funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. So we need to show that ongoing, we're meeting our goals and objectives. So you may be on occasion asked by our external evaluators for some feedback on that. They're very nice, by the way. We're not afraid of our evaluators, so that always works out well. Then on this page, you'll also see this link to being an AIM state, an at-a-glance view. So here's where you will see sort of the years laid out. So what happens immediately in 2020, and then what do the years 2021 to 2024 look like, mapped out? What are the activities monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly? What are some of those additional activities? And then toward the end of the project would be another one of those convenings where you bring your team and your interagency collaborative together. And then our criteria, really, as you can imagine, it's hard to come up with criteria for something like this because it's kind of a competition, but really kind of not. We want to have a wide range of states to be part of this cohort. We want states that have already established some progress in the provision of accessible materials across their state. And we also want some states that are just starting this process. Really what we most are in need of is evidence that your state is ready, that your state is committed to this goal, that you're motivated, that you have a plan to pull your team together. And Luis will show you in the application some of the questions that we have to try to uncover that. And of course, we want to make sure that you're in agreement to fulfill the responsibilities. Then once you get to the end of this page, there's an apply now that will take you directly to the application. But if you're coming back in at any time, you can always get to the application from the top of the page. So it looks like some questions have come in. So let's take a moment to go through some of these questions. I'm going to stop sharing and
We also have
take a pause.
special guest with us, Cynthia Jan Rogers from
Oh, good. Jan's here. Excellent.
So one of the questions was from Brian. He wanted to know whether the new cohort will have access to the previous cohort. And I mentioned that our former cohort will be relying on them as critical friends that will continue to inform our work. They're such great resources, and we really appreciate all of the work that they did. And so we look forward to continuing that relationship in that role of critical friends to our work.
Great, thank you for that question. And now might be a good time to bring Jan in if she's ready for a couple of questions. This might be an answer to Brian's question. So Jan, we had talked about a couple of questions. One being, so Jan is from Jan. If you want to introduce yourself, your role in Ocala in Ohio, and then being part of the previous AIM Center. For those of you who aren't aware, Brian obviously knows that there was a previous cohort of states. The AIM Center ran from 2014 to 2019. We had a cohort of 8 states at that time. And then we had to recompete. So the AIM Center funding for the previous center ended last September. We recompeted over the summer to continue the center, and we won, which we're delighted about. So we're repeating this process. We've made some tweaks, obviously, to the selection and some of the responsibilities of the next cohort of states, but there is a lot to learn, as Brian alludes to. There's a lot to learn from the experience of the previous states. So Jan, do you want to say a little bit about your role in Ohio and about your experience and how the AIM Center's TA supported Ohio between 2014 and 2019?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the ATN AIM Program Director in Ohio. So we have a center that is, it's funded by our Department of Education, but we are not actually housed with them. So we're kind of a freestanding center. We did participate in the previous AIM cohort, and it was a great experience. If you're hesitant or if you're not sure, for us, it actually came at such a good time because we were at a place in our state where we had a separate AIM center and we had a separate AT center, and they were very uniquely set with kind of different paths. And as things would happen, there happened to be a grant that our Department of Ed put out, and they wanted to pull together a Center for Sensory Disabilities. And in doing that, they pulled in that AIM Center into our AT portion of things. So it really turned out to be a kind of a nice time to have the National AIM Center involved with us, because it kind of helped to kind of propel us through that process of pulling together 2 centers that had been running very differently, but you know, how could they look together and how could they work together, and then to get our Department of Ed on board with it too and pull in all of our unique partners. So it was a really fantastic opportunity. Additionally, I think, and I don't know what the plan is for this cohort, but in the previous cohort, we met monthly in a virtual meeting with the National AIM Center, all the different states together. And that was really helpful because it also provided another opportunity for us to kind of throw out ideas, to kind of test the waters and see what other people were doing, get their feedback, and then to hear the things that they were doing that we could then provide feedback to as well. So it was a really nice sharing opportunity among all the states. So we have some really nice partners now from other states that we can check in with if we have questions to see what they're doing or get different ideas. We also had some opportunities for new projects that occurred in Ohio at that time, and OER was starting to just get some traction. And so we were trying to figure out how to kind of address that issue of OER and making sure things were accessible as people were launching things, and we wanted to make sure that teachers were thinking about accessibility before they even put things into our OER repository. So again, it was a nice opportunity to work with some other states that had had some of those similar issues, to talk with the national folks and to try to work through how to best manage things as they were coming out. I think finally, we also had a rule review that occurred in Ohio that was surrounding AIM. And so we again got some really nice support from the National AIM Center and from our other states on how we could reword and rethink one of our rule reviews on AIM and make it so that it was a little more effective. I think there was some traction too with the National Instructional Materials Center. And so some of all of that, I think, came together as a result of the work the National AIM Center did. So I don't know, is there anything else you want me to share about the things that we did, or?
I think that's great, Jan. Thank you very much. And I guess if others have questions for you, they can put them in the chat, and if you want to follow along, that would be great. I just have to agree with Jan and just the powerful outcomes from the previous AIM cohort of states. And you know, to your question, Brian, will we continue to rely on them? Absolutely. I think that the next cohort will find their input extremely valuable. And as Luis said, they'll play a critical friends role, kind of like Jan is here today, and continue to share what did they learn from their experience, but also, almost more importantly, what were the outcomes that the next AIM cohort can benefit from? What are the policies? What are the guidelines? What did they learn about collaboration across the state that the next cohort can learn from? And Brian, the other question that you had that I wanted to address was the question about how low performing schools are selected. And I just wanted to, I'm going to share my screen again, just to point out where that is not clarified, but where it comes up here. Let's see. Okay, so I think where you caught that. So it's under our criteria for selecting AIM states. And one of those criteria is participation of leadership from 3 school districts. Select at least one with high need schools, including those in rural areas of your state and/or with a high percentage of students from low income families or traditionally underserved populations. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a low performing school, although I do understand that oftentimes that schools in marginalized areas of a state are often also low performing. But it's more that we're looking for partnerships with school districts that are in those areas of the state that have higher populations of students from diverse racial backgrounds, who are from families for whom English is not their first language, in rural parts of the state. So we can do that from a number of ways. I think when Luis provides an overview, a tour of the application, it'll come through there. We can also use things like the National Center of Education Statistics to kind of see what the sort of what the diversity of the districts are. So there are a number of ways that we can do that, but it really is, based on, your state's perspective to be, and obviously to your benefit, to be selecting a district that is, that has unique needs, so that we can make sure that what we are developing for practices actually applies across a variety of school district demographics.
That's a great question, Brian. Thanks. And everyone else, if you have any other questions, put them in the chat. If we don't get to it during this break, we'll make sure to leave a little bit of time at the end. There was one other question from Jane. Let me just scroll up to it here. Her question, thank you, Jane. Great to see you here from Wisconsin. In what year does our state develop a statewide AIM implementation plan?
Oh, so that would be toward the end. We won't spring that on you year one or even year two. But yes, so we're calling that an AIM sustainability plan. And that would be kind of the exit ticket from the cohort. And again, something that sustainability plan is something that we will co-develop with the cohort, so that there is some consistency across the cohort in terms of the sustainability plan that each state develops, but also gives you all some autonomy on its structure. But that's something that we would co-develop, and it's a long-term output of the AIM Center. So we're looking at that to be developed in years 4 and 5. So that would be 2023, 2024.
Great. And then the other question, and that goes for everybody else who's on the webinar, Lauren asked about being in touch with other people in New York regarding interest in this application. So for sure, you can get in touch with us and we can make those connections within your state. I think those are all the questions that we have so far, but if you have any others, please make sure to enter them into the chat, and then we'll try to reserve some time to answer those towards the end of the webinar. So I will go ahead and share my screen unless there's anything else that you want to go over, Cynthia.
No, over to you, Luis.
All right, give me a second here while I bring up my web browser. Okay, so as Cynthia said, you can access the application from our AIM Center website. It's going to be located under About AIM, and then towards the bottom, you're going to find the AIM State Cohort application link. And then you can apply by following the link either at the top of the page or all the way at the bottom. So I've already opened this in a separate tab just to save us a little bit of time. So once you follow that link, it will bring you to a splash screen or an opening screen that just provides some general information. You can also follow the link for the responsibilities, benefits, and criteria if you want to review those before you start the application. And then just a few bulleted items here just to help you prepare for completing the application. We've made available a downloadable PDF version of the application, so that's something that you can print and use for planning purposes. And to help organize your team and collect information that will be helpful as you complete the application. The other thing to note is you can actually, you don't have to complete the application in one sitting. You can actually start it and then come back to it at a later time. But you do need to use the same device and web browser that you used to start the survey, because SurveyMonkey, which is the system that we use, it stores a cookie that then allows you to resume where you left off without having to enter all the information again. So that can be a really nice time-saving feature. So as long as you're on the same device and the same web browser, that feature should work. And then we really want you to take your time. Well, there is a deadline for the application, which is May 1st. But we want you to be as thorough as possible and complete all of the fields. But to give you a little bit of flexibility in working through the application, there's only one question that's currently marked required. And the reason for that is that if we made all of the questions required, then you would have some difficulty kind of going through the different screens and getting an overview of the entire survey. So we want you to complete all of the fields, but only one of them is marked required in the online version of the survey. Again, just a reminder, the application deadline is May 1st, and then the notifications will be sent on or before Friday, June 5th. So once you get through that information on the opening screen, you'll be ready to start completing the survey. So the first screen, just we want you to enter some of the important contact information for your team. And something to note here is there's a pull down menu for states. And you're probably going to be wondering, where is, what are some of these states? Why are they missing here? And the reason why we took them out of this list is that they were on the previous cohort. So as Cynthia mentioned, we had a previous cohort of 8 states that we worked with prior to this version of the AIM Center. So they're not on this list because they're not eligible for the new cohort. So any of these states here will be eligible to be part of this new cohort. So you will go through and put in the name and contact information for the primary person who will be the contact for your state's application. And then you can name up to 3 other people here. And then we just want to know some basic information about how you found this opportunity, whether it was from visiting the AIM Center website, through social media, or maybe someone told you about it. Could be a colleague, or you heard about it on the listserv. So that's just very basic information, just so that we have someone that we can go back to if we have any questions about the application. Then we get into the state level, or the state AIM leadership team. And on each screen, at the top of the screen, you're going to see some information about who should be on each of these components of the state team. So the first part of the application here is going to focus on the AIM leadership team. And so we want you to list a minimum of 5 and up to 8 state level individuals who will be on your state's leadership team. And then there's some suggestions as to who should be on that state leadership team. And really the goal is to have a balanced representation. So we want to make sure that there's representation from special education, from general education, and from EdTech programs. So you will go through and complete that information. And for each member, you'll provide some rationale as to why they should be on that leadership team. I'm not going to go through and complete this. It's pretty self-explanatory. And as Cynthia mentioned, not only will you have representation from the state level, but you also need to have some local level representation from 3 school districts. And again, the AIM Center will help with the selection, the identification of those school districts. And in response to your question, Brian, really what we're looking is to make sure that at least one of these districts serves high need schools. That's defined in the criteria, so you can take a look at that document. And that could be schools that are in the rural areas of the state, or ones that have a high percentage of students from low-income families or other traditionally underserved populations. So again, there's information about the constitution of that team, and then you can go to the next screen. And this is a really important part. As Cynthia mentioned, there's really 3 components here: the leadership team, which will have state and local level representation, and then this interagency collaborative, where it really addresses the different stakeholder groups that the AIM Center works with. And the goal, again, is to have coordination and communication between the different levels of education across the lifespan. And so with this interagency collaborative, you'll have representation from early childhood programs, K-12, which will be sort of the anchor, as Cynthia mentioned, and then higher education institutions, workforce development programs, and parent centers. And using our national connections, the AIM Center will help with the selection of people to be on that interagency collaborative. So again, the goal here is to really create systemic change by bringing all these stakeholders together so that they're working in concert to create a robust system for the provision and use of AIM in your state. So the next part of the application really breaks this down by stakeholder group. And so we'll start with early childhood. You'll see a pattern with each of these stakeholder groups in the application. It's going to ask you a series of questions like, are any of the state level members of your leadership team engaged in IDEA Part C services? So the questions are going to be specific to that stakeholder group. So we will go through that for early childhood, for higher education, and then for workforce. And again, the questions are going to be very specific to that stakeholder group. For parent engagement, then we have a few questions here that are about your commitment to the responsibilities of being an AIM state. And there's a reference document that you can access here. Again, it's the responsibilities, benefits, and criteria document that we've referenced a number of times. But if you have any questions, first check out that document. And then if the questions are not answered, when you review that document, by all means, get in touch with Cynthia or myself, and we'll try to get you an answer. And then I think we're getting towards the end here. These last few screens have to do with the status of your state's existing system for providing AIM and accessible technologies. And what I want to highlight is what's in bold here, that the purpose is not to evaluate or place judgment on the current state of your state system, but really is to gauge readiness for the work that we're about to embark in as part of this cohort. So you'll see a number of questions here. And in fact, these questions align really well to some quality indicators for the provision of AIM that the AIM Center has developed. And those are available on our website as well. And we'll try to put a link to those in the chat. And then there'll be a few questions about your motivation for joining the cohort. So these are all open-ended questions. For instance, what your primary interest is in joining the AIM cohort, what you hope to get out of it, how being in the AIM state cohort will align to your state's visions and goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so on. And then we get to everyone's favorite screen, the one where you've done all the work, you've done all the planning, you've collected all the information, you've filled out the application, and then you're ready to click done to submit it. So again, the deadlines are May 1st, and then notifications should go out on June 5th, on or about June 5th. So I will pause there and see if there are any questions about the application itself, or about the information that Cynthia provided earlier in the webinar.
So Jane just added a question just as you were wrapping up. She asked, does the state team meet along with the interagency team activities for virtual meetings? So yes, not frequently. So we were trying to devise or at least an expectation of the AIM Center. So we have our expectation. But then you as a state may choose to set up another structure, and you could also, depending on, you might propose to us that within your state you have a little bit of a different structure. I would say that you want to make sure that your state is actively involved and keeps the structure that we've set up for the AIM cohort. But if you want to set up something that is a little bit different than what we've suggested for coordination and communication with the interagency collaborative, that absolutely is certainly negotiable. So let me share with you the I think the at a glance page I think is kind of helpful for this. So under this this October to December would be really the first meeting between that state AIM leadership team, so sort of the K-12 intensive technical assistance team having the convening with the Interagency Collaborative. So that is an October to December range is what ideally we would like to have prepared. And then from 2021 to 2024, so really during the heart of the project, would be these quarterly meetings. So each AIM State Interagency Collaborative Stakeholder Group meets quarterly with its AIM Center TA specialist. And then each AIM State Leadership Team meets quarterly with its AIM Interagency Collaborative. So that is for what we're suggesting is up to 2 hours, 4 times a year, where your state K-12 intensive TA team meets, could be remotely, could be in the same place. Obviously, it will also depend on where your interagency collaborative is located, considering they're made up of early childhood, higher ed, and workforce representatives, and we know every state structures a little bit differently. So it may be that some people can be on site for a meeting and some people may need to call in. But our expectation, what we think is reasonable in order to maintain that consistent communication and coordination as your state is progressing, would be a quarterly 2-hour meeting, and then another face-to-face meeting of the AIM State Leadership Team and the Interagency Collaborative would happen toward the end of the project. So late 2023, early 2024, everybody would come together in person again to really talk about that AIM sustainability plan. Does that answer your question, Jane? It's always a balance of giving sufficient, too little, and too much information. And Andrea was asking if they will receive the PDF of the application via email. Luis, do you want to share that process again, where the PDF is?
Absolutely, and I just posted it in the chat as well.
Oh, great.
So once you start the application, on that splash screen at the beginning of the application, there's a link that you can select to download the PDF. But I've also included the URL that will take you directly to the PDF for you to print it out in the chat.
Yeah, so here it is. When you open the application, it's right here on that first page, the downloadable PDF. All right. Can some members of state leadership team also be part of the interagency team? So that's an excellent question, because there probably is likely to be crossover of some of these, some of these individuals on your, on your AIM team, regardless of where they fall in terms of their roles and responsibilities, may have crossover between K-12 and the other groups. So I think that's something that it could be likely. I think what is helpful to follow is really that distinction. The reason that we have this structure is because of the way the AIM Center is funded by the Office of Special Education Programs. The AIM Center is responsible for providing 3 different tiers of technical assistance: intensive technical assistance, and that is for the K-12 state leadership team. So those are the individuals on the team that really have roles and responsibilities for the K-12 system and making sure that students with disabilities receive materials and technologies that are accessible to them in a timely manner. So that's really the K-12 intensive TA. And then targeted technical assistance for our funding is for those other stakeholder groups: early childhood, higher ed, workforce, families. So it may be that there is some personnel who have crossover between K-12 and one of those other stakeholder groups. What I would advise not is to have parent representation that is also on the in one of those interagency collaboratives or K-12. It would be really helpful to have parent representation that's independent of the delivery system, the provision system that's being developed by the higher ed, workforce, early childhood, or K-12 teams. Does that make sense, Diane? I know it's not a yes or a no. Again, it depends and the circumstances of your state. It's quite likely that it would be appropriate. Jan, do you want to say a little bit about any suggestions or recommendations that you have for states that are interested in being part of a cohort such as what Ohio participated in?
Yeah, I think if you're interested and you think you can meet the guidelines, I'd say do it. It was a great opportunity for us. We really appreciated all the help that we got from the other states and from the National AIM Center. And I think, go into it with a mindset of being open to listen to what other people are doing and what they have to say, and then also be very open about what your state is doing. And I think, the more open that you can be, I think the more help and the more benefit that you'll get out of things. And then just share your challenges and your successes with everybody, because I think that's really the beauty of it, is being able to, get all that great information and to support other states as well with the great ideas that you have.
Great, thanks, Jan. And Jane has another question. These questions are really good, and I'm so impressed with this group because you all caught on pretty quickly to the structure of the next of this AIM cohort. So your questions indicate that you're understanding the way we've set this up, which is no small feat. So thank you for these clarifying questions. So Jane's asking, so our team's work will be to plan and implement systems of support to provide AIM and accessible technologies throughout the time of this project, not just work to get ready to do that. That is correct, Jane. So really the work of the AIM cohort will really begin pretty early on. So once you have your team in place, fortunately, the AIM Center has a long history. So most of you here know the AIM Center goes back to, many of you may have likely worked with Chuck Hitchcock and Joy Zabala and Skip Stahl. So we are really fortunate to benefit from a long history of resources and expertise. So we will be ready to kick in our technical assistance as soon as your team is ready to go. So that will really start with the quality indicators with the critical components. We have those for K-12, for higher ed, for workforce. We're developing them for early childhood. So pretty early on, we will be digging into those. Your state and districts will do a self-assessment against those critical components. We'll be going through the process of iterating and improving those critical components to make them more relevant based on the feedback that we're getting from all of you. So really will be this interactive, we're providing technical assistance on evidence-based practices relevant to your state. You're implementing them, giving us feedback. So it really is this ongoing iterative process that, by the end of the 5 years, we're obviously going to be putting out resources that can be used nationally by other states, other districts, as well as those other interagency collaborative relevant resources for early childhood, higher ed, and workforce. We will be developing those throughout the 4 years, but the outcome really is those the sustainability plans that other states can also learn from. So we will we'll hit the ground running, we're hoping, because we're at the AIM Center. We're fortunate, we're ready to go. It's new funding, but it's really not a new project.
I went ahead and Cynthia mentioned the quality indicators, so I shared a link to that in the chat in case you're curious and want to review those. And then just to mention a couple of the things that we worked on together as a cohort. One of the tools that the AIM Center developed in the last iteration of the AIM Center was the AIM pilot. And so we got lots of really helpful advice and feedback from AIM cohort states that really led to the creation of a really nice tool that we'll now have available. And part of that was we selected a number of exemplars of practices from our cohort states to highlight in the AIM pilot tool. So we're really thankful to people like Jan and her team and other members of the cohort that provided exemplars that we could use as part of that tool, so that you can see how these quality indicators work, in action, in practice, within its specific context. So that's just one example of a product that we co-designed or co-created together, to give you a sense.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Luis, because an AIM pilot for states is also on our to-do list for the next cohort. So the pilot that Luis was just describing is designed for school districts. The self-assessment progress monitoring really is in the context of a school district in terms of roles and responsibilities. The protocols, procedures really are at the district level context. So one of our first to-dos in the next AIM cohort is to develop a pilot for states, and to be able to, as we did with the previous AIM cohort and the development of the AIM pilot, to get feedback, get exemplars from the next cohort of states. And Jane, you added on to your question about how the implementation of practices will happen in this cohort. You added that you're trying to anticipate time allotment because this has to be budgeted for in people's positions and roles, and we are certainly sensitive to that. We know that $2,000 stipend from the AIM Center is not going to cover the time of the personnel that will be participating in this project. We're hoping that this is work that your state is and districts are already undergoing, so that this technical assistance will help support that. But we also know that there may be, that obviously the process by which you may have been going about that without the AIM Center may have been different than with the AIM Center. Jan, I don't know if you want to speak to that. This next AIM cohort, the structure is a little bit different than the previous cohort, just in terms of its, the expectations and the way that the personnel need to be placed into teams. But the time commitment in terms of the monthly meetings, and I know, Jan, obviously you've been listening in and you know a bit about the way the next AIM Center is going to be structured. Do you have any any suggestions for Jane regarding personnel and time allotment?
Well, I think it's a great question, for one, because there is time involved. But I think, as Cynthia mentioned, I think if, thinking about it in terms of the work that you're doing, and if this is something that can move you forward in an area that you're already wanting to move forward in, or if it's, occurring to you now that maybe we do need to be moving forward in an area that we hadn't been thinking about, I think it's good to think about the amount of time that people would be involved in that. It was, admittedly, it was difficult and challenging to keep our districts on board and interested. We did end up changing districts along the way because people would come in and think that they were interested and that they could spend the time, and then they were being pulled in so many different ways that they weren't able to then follow through. But I do think, even with that said, we were able to touch a lot of districts that we may not have been able to do that direct touch with. So, I think it was all time, I think, well worth spent. But everybody's got to figure out how they're using their time and allotting their human resources to things. So, for us, it just came at a great time because we were already in a process of change. And so this just offered us an opportunity to have some good guidance on how to make that change happen well.
Great, thank you, Jan. All right, so we have 1 minute left, and we do have, I will share the PowerPoint. If there are additional questions, we are able to stay on a little bit longer. So, as you're processing this, just wanted those of you who need to head out, just a reminder that the applications are due on May 1st. We expect to get notifications out by June 5th. You can contact us anytime at aim@cas.org if you have questions. We can schedule a time to hop on a Zoom to answer any questions that you have, or it may be easy to answer over email. There are also our email addresses and our evaluation for today, and Leslie dropped that in the chat as well. Thank you very much, Leslie. And thank you to our captioner today. Really appreciate your time, Lenore. And thank you to everybody who hopped on. I hope this answered your questions, and hopefully it motivated you and didn't scare you away from the opportunity. If you're scared, please reach out to us again so that we can alleviate any of your fears and make sure that you have what you need.
And thank you, Jan, for offering your perspective on the value of being part of the cohort. We really appreciated all of your work as part of that cohort, and appreciate you being here with us today to answer questions.
Well, thanks for having me. And again, it was a pleasure to be involved in the cohort. So thanks for that opportunity as well.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for your time today, and have a good rest of your week.